Bryan Fischer here for D1 Ticker. Thrilled to welcome you into another edition of AD Search Insights. This time we're talking Georgia Tech with Ken Sugiura of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. And Ken, busy times there on the flats, and I'm sure there was certainly some inkling that Geoff Collins was on the hot seat. But Todd Stansbury, if we kind of go back a couple of months, was there any kind of inkling that he also was feeling the pressure there in Atlanta?
I'd say so. Even going back a few more months than that, I think it really. When the ball started rolling, I guess you'd say, at the end of last season, it was Geoff Collins' third 3-win season in a row. There were signs, I guess, depending on kind of how you want to look at it, there were signs that maybe things were turning a corner, but certainly also signs that things weren't going well at all. And it was at that point that Todd Stansbury, just before the last game of the season, said of Geoff Collins, "I've got my man." And obviously kind of putting his chips behind Collins. And so that, I think, kind of frustrated or pick your own verb, donors and fans about, maybe you were hoping for something or thinking that he was feeling a lot of the same things that fans were or the donors were. But for him to put, say he's who we're riding with and to put his full confidence behind him, I think kind of raised some alarms. And then after that, I think they were hoping for some coaching changes that didn't come about. And so that really put this season, in a picture of if Geoff Collins doesn't work out, donors saying, I don't think we think that Todd Stansbury should be the guy to pick the next AD, pick the next head coach. And so when, the team got out of the gate really slowly, they lost badly, 41-10 to Clemson the first game. They lost 42-0 at home to Ole Miss, and then finally 27-10 to UCF. I think that was certainly it for Geoff Collins. And I think, again, because there was a sense that donors were really pressuring Angel Cabrera, the school president, of we don't think he should be the guy to move this forward with the next coaching hire. That was ultimately, I think, what pushed him out the door also.
So you mentioned Georgia Tech. They end up losing to UCF on Saturday. Todd Stansbury and Geoff Collins, they're kind of shown the door, left in the wind a little bit over that weekend. Officially shown the door on Monday. What kind of happened in that interim period after the loss?
Well, I think on Sunday it wasn't official. I mean, what I was hearing was that certainly Geoff Collins was out, and most likely that Todd Stansbury was too. It's possible, conceivably, that decision was still being finalized. But from what I gather, that it was told, reliably that they were, that Collins was out and Stansbury likely was going to be also out. And now finally on Monday morning, it was, the report had been out, but the coaches, Geoff Collins or Todd Stansbury hadn't been informed officially. That happened Monday morning, and that was kind of what said. And the school put out a release at that point, and I guess later that day, or maybe it was, the same time, Brent Key was named the interim, and Frank Neville, who is Cabrera's chief of staff, was named the interim AD.
I mean, you've reported a little bit as well, that both guys were escorted to their cars, shown the door a little bit hastily there on Monday. What was kind of the reaction to just that aspect of things over the weekend?
It's interesting. The report, I think, there was received two different ways. One is that this is standard operating procedure in corporate America, and they shouldn't be surprised. And if they didn't produce, then this is what happens. I think there were other people, certainly people within the athletic department, and other people that are, that recognize particularly what Todd Stansbury had done for the department and the school. He's an alumnus. He played football there. I think you could make the case that a lot of things besides the football hires, which obviously is very significant, he did pretty well. And so there was that side that were, dismayed, to use Bill Curry's or the former Tech coach. I think what I probably didn't, present as well as I would have wanted in a story was that I think it is standard practice in corporate America. And I think that was represented in some of the people that I quoted. But the other thing is it's not standard practice. And you know this well, too, within athletics. I talked to, people that were saying, I've never heard of this happening before. That, certainly there were instances of coaches at Tech being fired that this didn't happen to. So it was, to me, it struck me as unusual just because in the world of college athletics, it doesn't happen often, and certainly maybe not at all in some cases, according to some people. So it was kind of a mixed, a polarizing response, I guess, to kind of depending on your perspective on how those things should go down.
It definitely raised a few eyebrows there, and you mentioned that Todd Stansbury, played it for Bill Curry there at Tech back in the '80s.
Mm-hmm.
It was a long time administrator at the school before stops at Oregon State and UCF before that. How would you kind of sum up his tenure? And we understand where the football program is, but in terms of everything else, how would you kind of sum up what he did there on the flats?
There were a lot of different kind of data points, I guess. Certainly, maybe the one thing that I would think that Todd would take pride. No, probably a few things, but one is that a lot of the non-revenue sports, volleyball in particular, softball is another one, really reached highs competitively that they hadn't hit in a decade or maybe even more. Women's basketball is another, and he was responsible for the hires of the softball coach Eileen Morales and the women's basketball coach Nell Fortner. I think there were things just in terms of student athlete welfare that he was championing, and I think very much Homer Rice, the great athletic director at Tech in the 80s and 90s, he was very much a champion of what Tech calls a total person program, which is designed to help athletes at the school become successful, not just in their sport, but also professionally and personally beyond college. So that's something that I think he put a lot of emphasis on and really valued. There's an internship program within that department. I think has been very successful. On the other hand, they probably one of the bigger things is financially for a number of different reasons, but certainly I think he ultimately put it on his head. There was pretty significant losses. I believe when he started, it's something like $5 million in their reserve fund, kind of like their bank account. And when he left for different reasons, one of which had to do with coaching transition before him, but other, COVID and other things. But certainly part of his doing too. There were, I think, something like $12 million in the hole. There was another significant matter. Apologize for the dog. He was sued by Oregon State for not repaying his buyout, which brought the school a lot of in time, and which brought the school a lot of embarrassment. He had to, the school had to give him another loan to cover the debt that he owed the school still, Oregon State, and so that I think put him, on less secure footing with Cabrera and just maybe just standing at the school in general.
I mean, is it safe to kind of sum up things that ultimately this kind of came down to Geoff Collins? What was his guy, as you alluded to earlier, and it simply just didn't work out? Is that the ultimate reason he was shown the door?
I think so. I mean, I think if Geoff Collins were, the team was doing better, was making the improvements that they had anticipated, he'd be fine. All the things are, pluses and minuses, but ultimately, yeah, you're right. What happened with the football team far outweighed anything else.
You mentioned President Cabrera. He's hired Parker to help assist in this search.
Right.
What kind of AD is he kind of looking for as Tech moves forward?
He said, well, actually, Frank Neville said kind of the things you might expect. Someone that represents the values of Georgia Tech well, someone that can kind of understand this, what college's athletics is heading to with the NIL and portal, or was already in for that matter. But the third thing was kind of interesting to me and kind of says a little bit about what this hire represents, is that it's someone who knows college football well. And that says to me, that speaking for the school, we want somebody that is going to knock this hire out, this next hire out, whoever it might be.
Speaking of football coaches and hiring, there's a lot on the to-do list. Well, what else is there besides football?
But for the new AD?
Yes, for the new AD.
Well, certainly, obviously, with the ACC and seeming like it's in some flux, it's positioning Georgia Tech well or as best it can is one thing. Obviously, as every AD is facing collectives and NIL and portal and kind of defining an ideal strategy for Georgia Tech. I mean, Tech's collective situation is, I think they're getting started, but certainly probably not to the point where some of their competitors are in terms of what they can offer. prospective. Well, I mean, offer that, but they can tell prospective athletes of here's what you can expect if you come to Georgia Tech. They're about to actually start a really big. Actually, they've completed a significant capital campaign. Actually, that's probably another thing that Todd Stansbury did well. He led a $125 million campaign that actually exceeded that total, and so that's scheduled to start soon. It's maybe up in the air a little bit when that'll be, but their main athletic headquarters is going to get a significant renovation. So that's something that the new hire will have to oversee. Those are probably the big things. Probably some things I might be overlooking, but I'd say those are the kind of the big ticket items.
The school president also talked a little bit about investing in athletics, kind of get back up to being world class. I believe was
right.
That he used. What are the ambitions there? I mean, is this going to mark a bit of a sea change for Georgia Tech to kind of get back in the running with a lot of their ACC peers?
Potentially, yeah. It was. It caught me. It caught my attention when Dr. Cabrera said that as something along the lines of, "I'm prepared to do or committed to doing anything. I'm personally invested in turning around this football team and having, like you said, a world-class athletics program." If you consider where Georgia Tech is, as I wrote in a story, it'd be hard to make the case they're the class of the ACC right now. They're probably somewhere in the middle, towards maybe in the bottom third. And so you're talking about competing on a level with North Carolina, Duke, schools like that are competitive nationally in a lot of different sports. Tech is maybe getting there in some sports, but certainly as a program, there's still they have had the challenge of not fully funding all their sports. I believe they're there now in terms of scholarships, and so to hear that and to hear that when I think of world-class athletic programs, I'm thinking of schools like Notre Dame and Stanford and schools like that are competing for national championships, a lot of different sports. I mean, Georgia Tech, outside of 4 football national titles, has won 1 NCAA title. So they've got a long way to go if they want to be on par with schools like that, if they really want to be world-class. And so I think Tech has always seen itself as a place that, we're not going to have the donor support that other schools have. We're not, a football factory, and we're going to have to, a phrase that Todd Stansbury often used, we're going to punch above our weight. And so, so to hear Dr. Cabrera say that we want to be world class, and just like we are in other things we do at this school, was caught my attention. And so, time will tell kind of what that means. There's obviously the foundation that funds a lot of things at the school, and on the academic side is pretty vast, and I'm not quite sure exactly how that'll work in terms of if something can be done to help athletics. But yeah, that's certainly one of the things that I'm very curious to learn more about.
Sitting here in early October, what's kind of the timeline you think for the search?
Well, certainly, if they want to hire a football coach and be ready to do it and take advantage of the head start they've gotten by firing Geoff Collins in September, you'd want to have that AD in place, no later than mid-November and ideally earlier. I've heard kind of grapevine kind of stuff that I think that the hire could be done for the AD could be done relatively soon. It just started last week officially. But if they could get something done within, the next 2 weeks, then that's putting you in better place to hire, getting your ID on campus. And I think one thing that it was Dr. Barr, maybe Frank Neville mentioned, was that they wanted him or her to be able to see the football team in person. And so that means, ideally again, early November hire. So I could see that happening. Just, I think they're ready to move. And so that would be the first step. And then, I think that the football hire certainly could happen, as they often do, as soon as, very close to the end of the regular season.
Well, everybody's always interested in names. Are you hearing anybody, or does somebody kind of make sense for this job as well?
Well, it's funny. There are, I haven't heard any names officially. Obviously, everyone's always got their lists. There's a few candidates that I think, were someone who, I think knows the school well, knows the industry pretty well, and mentioned that Charlie Cobb at Georgia State, he's obviously a local person. He spent a lot of time in Atlanta before he went to Appalachian State and now came back to be the AD at Georgia State. He's got a lot of success, has had a lot of success building football programs both at Appalachian State and at Georgia State now. So he's someone I think that might be a good fit. Mike Buddy, who's at Army again, has been in the ACC. He was at Wake Forest before going to Army, I believe, and obviously at Army has with Jeff Monken as coach, they've taken a program that was really about as low as could be and has made it really, really competitive, as I think as high as you could expect for Army. Outside the season hasn't gone as well as they've wanted so far. So those are two. Alan Green, I think, who resigned at Auburn, is probably another possibility. But he's obviously resigned. That made a good transition easier. So those are three. He hired when he was at Buffalo, he hired Leipold. So I think that you pointed him, and he's got a track record of having done something significant in the football world. So those are three. I'm sure there's plenty of others, but those are three that to me that could be fits.
I mean, is it safe to assume that just kind of based on where the school is right now, that they would kind of want somebody that does have that previous AD experience, or could somebody, a possible assistant AD, associate AD, that deputy AD, that types get in the mix as well?
I think it's possible. I mean, to me, particularly given that you're wanting someone that has that they know can build a football team, or at least certainly hire a good coach. That would lean to me to say that they probably want someone that's been through this before. Maybe there's someone out there that Parker or whomever else finds that, okay, we know this, we have a lot of confidence in this candidate, as even though he or she's never been a sitting AD. But my sense of it would be that it would be someone that's done this job before.
Parker also expected to be involved in the football search. Brent Key, the interim,
Right.
Georgia Tech alum, is there a chance that he kind of gets the job if he performs well over these next couple of weeks? Already got a big upset win over
Right.
Pitt under his belt, but a lot, there has been a lot of speculation around the football opening. Who are some of the names that could be in the mix for that? Obviously, AD dependent in terms of who they hiring.
Right. So yeah, I'll start with Brent Key. He's never been a head coach. I think he's only been a coordinator 1 year, and so there is that against him. But he's got 7-8 games, including the win over Pitt, to show that he is capable to handle this job. That the kids respond to him. That he's got it. Once they get to the interview part of it, that he has a vision and a plan, and he knows what he wants to do with recruiting Atlanta, and here's who I'd hire or keep, those sorts of things. I think as long as he's competitive, the team is competitive, and that they're seeing the kind of things they want to see out of the team in terms of being disciplined and playing with enthusiasm and making plays and not making mistakes. I think those are things that would give him a shot. I wrote something the other day. I think obviously the name you hear a lot is Deion Sanders, and my sense of it is, I think, he's obviously, I think is a name that would bring a lot of excitement, and I think there would be a recruiting advantage he might provide. But, he also hasn't been a coach at the FBS level, and he's only been a coach at an FCS for I guess he's in his second full season. So there is a question about, his readiness for that job. Jeff Monken is a name that comes up. I think obviously his ties to Paul Johnson, I guess, kind of depending on how you viewed Paul Johnson's tenure and whether you'd be excited or not as excited to see that sort of style of play return. Obviously, he's proven himself to be able to win at a high level at a place that's tough to win at. So he's another one. Off the top of my head, I guess, who else? Let's see. Oh, excuse me. The Jamie Chadwell at Coastal Carolina is a name that pops up. He's kind of become the group of five hot name. I think not just at Georgia Tech in this search, but almost any school that has an opening. I think he's the name that comes up. Proven himself at Coastal Carolina as an exciting style of play, which I think would probably be important or helpful. So those are three I think that are on a lot of people's lips. As to how far that goes with any of them, I think that's ultimately can be up to the new athletic director and what he or she decides is the direction to go.
Well, I mean, you mentioned Army and Coastal Carolina. Those are two schools that run some kind of form of the option offense. Is that
Right.
something that you think Tech could be amenable to returning to? Do you think they still want to kind of move away from that after the Paul Johnson era? And honestly, how good of a job is this? The Tech course load is very tough. It can be tough
Right.
to get kids in there.
Right.
In terms of recruit, as much as you are within, pretty much one of the talent hotbeds in the country. How good of a job can this Tech football team be?
Right. Yeah. So I guess to answer your first question about the option, I think that's a tough question to ask. I think it's or excuse me, a tough question to answer. I think it's I think certainly he's proven himself. Jeff Munkin has, and he's had he's keeps being a name that pops up when other Power Five jobs open, particularly low. Those are kind of on the lower tier ones that he's a guy that can win. And yes, it'd be different and make it tougher to recruit, but certainly he's proven himself. I don't know. I can certainly see where a lot of fans and maybe in recruiting circles there'd be some resistance. But if an AD is willing to kind of take those bullets and say, he's our guy and we're going to ride with him and you'll see results eventually. I think ultimately that's, it would make him, to me, a reasonable hire. But I guess the same goes for Jamie Chadwell as well. I think his version is probably not quite the what fans are used to seeing with Paul Johnson in terms of the double slots and getting the quarterback getting the ball under center, and being more run based. But yeah, I mean, I would think that'd probably be more a style that I think fans would accept. And certainly they're very high scoring, which and obviously Army has been too, but that might make it a little more kind of this isn't quite what we've seen before, and maybe more, I guess, fans or whomever would be more willing to accept that version of it. As far as what kind of job it is, yeah, you pointed out some things that make it tough. The academic restrictions, like the number of majors that Georgia Tech has always been kind of an issue, I guess, that makes it harder to recruit. But I guess, and the fact that, as Todd Stansbury often said, that they're in a tough neighborhood. They're in a state where Georgia is at the very, very top right now, and the neighbor to their west, Alabama, is very close, and so is the neighbor to their east in Clemson. And you've got the rest of the ACC and ACC coming into Atlanta to recruit. And so it makes it hard. I mean, certainly Georgia Tech has that advantage, and Geoff Collins tried to play that advantage as much as he could have. We're in Atlanta, and we're Atlanta school, and it worked to some degree, but not obviously to the degree that you'd want. But you look at what happened before. It's in some ways ancient history, but Chan Gailey and actually George earlier started this streak. They went to, I think, something like 18 straight bowl games, and they won a national championship in 1990, which was a while ago, obviously. But and then Paul Johnson, when he was in 14, they finished in the top 10 in the country. So they've proven, in different ways that they can be competitive. Maybe not, at the very highest level, but certainly a team that can be competitive in the ACC. Go to the ACC title game and play for that. So in some ways, it does seem like it's a while ago now, given that there's been these 3 years where nothing's really happened, and so much has happened in that interim in college athletics. But certainly, I think if someone can coach well and knows how to recruit, I think you can build a competitive team. I have no doubt about that.
Well, it'll certainly make for some interesting times as you cover the team and moving forward, but fun times there on the flats. And thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure, Bryan.